Alhamdulillahi wahda. All praise and thanks are for Allah alone. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala man la nabiyya ba'da. And we ask Allah to raise the rank and mention of and grant peace to the one that there is no prophet after, Nabiyyina Muhammad, our Prophet Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira. To do the same for his family and his companions. Amma ba'du, then begin this evening, inshallah ta'ala. I wanted to share with you all some of what has been mentioned in the books of the Imams of the Salaf and I'tiqad. Some of the books about Aqidah that collect for us the usul of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that are at the core of what it means to be a believer, what the believer abides by, his convictions, what he believes about Allah, the unseen, what he believes about the Day of Judgment, what he believes about the prophets and the messengers, what he believes about all the matters of creed that are at the core of Islam, that encourage a person and that are the motivation for a person and the reasons why a person practices their religion correctly and abides by and submits to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stays away from the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yesterday we shared something of benefit as it relates to the uprightness and steadfastness of the heart and the steadfastness of the body. It comes as a result of proper beliefs. And today, inshallah ta'ala, we want to share some of what is in the books of the Imams of the Salaf, who wrote some of the most important books of Aqidah, the Creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, about character. And how in the books of Aqidah, the books of Creed, many of the scholars took out the time, usually at the ends of their books, to encourage us to have upright character. And from the most obvious and apparent reasons of why that is that after mentioning the core of the Sunnah, which is correct beliefs, then the Muslims who are following the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are Ahl Sunnah wal what? Ahl Sunnah and what? Wal Jama'ah. And Jama'ah, they are the people of Sunnah and unity upon the Sunnah. They are people of Sunnah and brotherhood and unity upon that. And from the greatest things that bring people together after having a singular understanding of the core of the religion, of those things that are not open to any reinterpretation of what it means to believe, from the greatest things that cause unity, the scholars say and they highlight, is al-akhlaq al-fadila. He has good character, that a Muslim has good character. And so the Muslim is compelled by his beliefs and he to say what is right and to do what is right, to treat people as he would like to be treated. And this is al-makhraj min al-fitna. This is the escape from every calamity and hardship in this world. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr, Sahih Muslim, he said, تَجِيءُ الْفِتَنُ فَيُرَقِّقُ بَعْضُهَا بَعْضًا تجيء الفتن فيقول المؤمن هذه مهلكتي وتجيء الفتن فيقول المؤمن هذه من أراد أن يزحزح عن النار ويدخل الجنة فلتأتيه منيته وهو يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر ويأتي إلى الناس الذي يحب أن يؤتى إليه. After explaining that there was never a prophet that Allah sent to any nation before him except that it was a right that they had upon him, that he teach them of every good that he knew for them, that he warned them of every evil which he knew for them, فإن أمتكم هذه, and that indeed this nation of yours will be stricken with bala wa umur tunkirunaha, calamities and matters that you would dislike, and fitna will come, and trials and tribulations will come, tests will come, and every time a trial comes, it will make the ones that came before it seem light and insignificant in comparison. Up until the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so whoever of you wants to be yuzahzah an an-nar, to be distanced far away from the hellfire, wa yudkhal al-jannah, and entered into the paradise, فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ, and let him make sure that his maniyah, his death comes to him, his demise, his time of death comes to him, or he has two things. وَهُوَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, while he believes in Allah and the hereafter, which is his aqidah. وَلِيَأْتِيَ لِلنَّاسِ الَّذِي يُحِبَّ أَنْ يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ وَيُؤْتُوا إِلَيْهِ, and let him treat people like he would like them to treat him. Let him deal with other people, let him speak with other people, treat other people, deal with other people like he would like to be treated. Let him deal with other people like he would like to be treated. And this is a theme that we find all throughout the Book of Allah, throughout its 114 surah, and all throughout the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the earliest of times until the end of his days sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the point that a person will come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam inquiring about the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will say that we saw him forbidding ibadat al-asnam wa ya'muru bimakarim al-akhlaq, forbidding the worship of idols and commanding us with makarim al-akhlaq, and with good character. And this is the advice that our scholars give us regularly over the years, to focus in our communities and to focus in our da'wah upon two things, and are inviting non-Muslims to Islam and inviting Muslims who are inside of the fold of Islam to the Sunnah and the proper understanding of Islam, to focus upon two matters, to focus upon Aqidah and in our teaching and our educating, and to focus upon our akhlaq, meaning for ourselves, that we are people who abide by good character and who demonstrate good character and good treatment of others. And so I want to share some of what is found in the writings of the Salaf as it relates to the Aqidah, the Salaf as it relates to the creed and the Aqidah of the Salaf. When they mention good character, and I'm not going to read this verbatim word for word, I'm going to take some passages, because otherwise these passages are longer than what I'm reading. But just to drive in the point, inshallah ta'ala, the first passage is taken from the book Sharh Sunnah, the explanation of the Sunnah. By Sunnah here, what is meant by the Sunnah is the creed of the Sunnah, by the great Imam Ismail ibn Yahya al-Muzani, the premier student, one of the premier students of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 263 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, فَهَذَا شَرْحُ السُنَّةِ, after mentioning the Aqidah of the Sunnah, the Aqidah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, فَهَذَا شَرْحُ السُنَّةِ تَحَرَّيْتُ كَشْفَهَا وَأَوْضَحْتُهَا فمن وفقه الله للقيام بما أبنته مع معونته له بالقيام على أداء فرائضه بالاحتياط في النجاسات وأسباغ الطهارة على الطاعات وأداء الصلوات على الاستطاعات وإيتاء الزكاة على أهل الجدات والحج على أهل الاستطاعة والصيام الشهر لأهل الصحة وخمس صلوات سنها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he mentions a number of acts of worship, and after saying that this is my explanation of the Sunnah that I have carefully explained, and he left without any ambiguity. Whoever is granted by Allah the ability to adhere to what I have clarified here, along with the assistance of Allah in performing the obligatory duties. And then he mentioned some of them, and carrying out any proper tahara, any the removal of filth, and performing the hajj, performing one's prayers, giving the zakat, so on and so forth. And he mentions the 5 daily prayers, and he mentions the prayers that are outside of that, the prayers for the Eid, the prayers for the lunar and solar eclipses and that sort of thing, the istisqa, the rain prayer when it is necessary. Then he says, واجتناب المحارم والاحتراز من النميمة والكذب والغيبة والبغي بغير الحق وأن يقال على الله ما لا يعلم كل هذا كبائر محرمات. He says, and along with all of that, with the pillars of worship, that they avoid the forbidden acts and they are cautious about gossiping and lying, backbiting and transgressing against people's rights without a right, and speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. All of these are from the major sins. All of these are from the major sins. وتحري في المكاسب والمطاعم والمحارم والمشارب والملابس, that a person is careful about what they eat and they are careful about falling into forbidden acts, and they are careful about what they drink, and they are careful about what they wear. واجتناب شهوات فإنها داعية لركوب المحرمات, that they avoid their passions and their desires that summon them and that call them and invite them to falling into forbidden acts. And up until he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, فَمَنْ يُسِّرَ لِهَذَا فَإِنَّهُ مِنَ الدِّينِ عَلَى هُدًى وَمِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ عَلَى رَجَاءٍ. That whoever finds it easy to do these things, to have these beliefs, and to act as a Muslim should act, and to have the character of a Muslim, then he is surely guided in his deen, and to be how a Muslim should be. And he should be hopeful of the mercy of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. Then he made dua, وَفَقَنَا اللَّهُ وَإِيَّاكَ إِلَى سَبِيلِهِ الْأَقْوَمِ بِمَنِّهِ الْجَزِيلَ الْأَقْدَمِ وَجَلَالِهِ الْعُلْيَا or al-Ali. He says, may Allah guide us and you to the straight path by his immense and his eternal grace and by his sublime majesty. That is the end of his aqidah. So he closed his aqidah by mentioning these matters of character. Likewise, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, in the book in which he professed the aqidah of Ahlul Hadith and recanted from being upon innovations that he previously used to believe upon, his book, and one of the two books in which he did that is called Al-Maqalat. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, at the end of his aqidah, وَيَرَوْنَ مُجَانَبَةَ كُلِّ دَاعٍ إِلَى بِدْعَةٍ. And the people of Sunnah, they believe in avoiding every caller to innovation. وَالتَّشَاغُلَ بِقِرَاءَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. And they believe in, and they have the conviction that a person should occupy themselves with reading the Quran. وَكِتَابَةِ الْآثَارِ. And writing down the narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَالنَّظَرِ فِي الْفِقْهِ. And they believe strongly and they have the conviction that a person should occupy themselves with studying Islamic law. مع التواضع وحسن الخلق وبذل المعروف وكف الأذى وترك الغيبة والنميمة والسعاية وتفقد المآكل والمشرب. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, and along with that a person should be humble and have good manners and do good deeds and withhold their harms from others and avoid backbiting and tale-carrying. Tale-carrying is where a person hears something from another person that may upset them and that is said about them. And they say, do you know what so-and-so said about you? Do you know what so-and-so said about you? This is from the most destructive of sins, to the point that some of the Salaf, they said that the namam yufsidu fi sa'a ma la yufsiduhu as-sahiru fi sana. That the namam, the tale carrier, the person who wants to make people upset with each other by saying things that were said about them to them. That so-and-so said such and such about you, to upset them. That this person in a single hour can cause more devastation and destruction than a witch or a sorcerer can carry out in an entire year. That is because the witch or the sorcerer, and the vast majority of what is done by them is to either make people hate each other or fall in love with each other. That is the main purpose of their magic. And the person who carries this sort of information and upsets other people and turns people against each other, they cause more destruction with their words than the sorcerer causes with his magic. Allah's refuge is sought. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, so the person leaves off, and the person of Sunnah, from his description, along with having correct beliefs, and he kaf al-adha wa tarak al-ghibati wa namimati, and that he leaves off ghiba and namima, and that he is careful about what he eats and what he drinks. فهذه جملة ما يأمرون به ويستعملونه ويرونه وبكل ما ذكروه من قولهم نقول إليه وإليه نذهب وما توفيقنا إلا بالله وهو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل. And he concludes his aqidah, and in that same way that Al-Muzani concluded his aqidah with making dua to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala and putting one's trust upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said this is a summary of what the people of hadith, people of sunnah command with and practice and what they believe in. And what all they have mentioned as their doctrine, we say that, and that is our doctrine, and that is what we believe in, and our success is only by Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. Similarly, the great Imam al-Ismaili rahimahullah ta'ala in his aqidah, his famous aqidah al-Ismailiyah, the book that is called al-Aqidah al-Ismailiyah, and the aqidah of al-Ismaili rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year, this great Imam of hadith, who died in the year 371 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, وَيَرَوْنَ مُجَانَبَةَ الْبِدْعَ وَالْآثَامِ وَالْفَخْرِ وَتَكَبُّرِ ويرون كف الأذى وترك الغيبة إلا لمن أظهر بدعة وهوى يدعو إليهما فالقول فيه ليس بغيبة عنده. He concludes his book in a similar fashion. After mentioning the creed of the Sunnah, he said, and alongside all of this, they encourage and they believe in avoiding bid'ah, all innovation, and they believe in leaving off atham, all of sin, wal fakhr wa takabbur, and leaving off arrogance and pride. وَيَرَوْنَ كَفَ الْأَذَى, and they believe and they advocate preventing harm from others. وَتَرْكَ الْغِيبَةِ, and avoiding backbiting. And they accept لِمَنْ أَظْهَرَ بِدْعَةً, except talking about those who openly call to innovation, and who call to al-hawa, and who call to deviant beliefs. يَدْعُ إِلَيْهِمَا فَالْقَوْلُ فِيهِ لَيْسَ بِغِيبَةٍ عِنْدَهُمْ. And they believe that warning against the innovator, speaking about the innovator to warn other people against him, is not considered ghiba. That is the consensus of the scholars. Likewise, Sheikh al-Islam Abu Ismail al-Sabuni, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 449 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he concluded his book in a similar fashion. And from what he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَسَعِي فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَالْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهْيِ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَالْبِدَارِ لَفِعْلِ الْخَيْرَاتِ أَجْمَعُ وَاتِّقَاءِ شَرِّ عَاقِبَةِ الطَّمَعِ يتواصون بالحق والصبر وتحابون في الدين ويتباغضون فيه ويتقون الجدال في الله والخصومات فيه. He said that along with having proper beliefs, that they practice moderation in their food and their drink and their clothing and their expenses, and they strive to do good deeds, and they enjoin what is right, and they forbid what is evil, and they hasten to do all sorts of good and righteous deeds, and they fear the evil consequence of greed, and they encourage each other to adhere to the truth and to be patient upon the truth, and they love each other for the sake of religion, and they detest and they hate who they hate, and for the sake of the religion, and they avoid argument about Allah and His religion and disputes about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he concluded his aqidah in a similar fashion. Before him, Qawam al-Sunnah Ismail al-Asbahani rahimahullah ta'ala, in his larger work that is called Al-Hujjah fi Bayan al-Mahajjah, and he concluded in a similar fashion by mentioning and after the creed of the people of Sunnah, the importance of good character. And from the most comprehensive and detailed of what has been written by the scholars about the effect of aqidah on character is what I want to share with you here. I had posted a resource, a PDF resource for you to read along with, from the words of Al-Imam Abdurrahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 1376 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, roughly 80 years ago, right? 1376, is that right? 60 years ago, 1960s or so. 1376 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, roughly about 60 years ago. And in his book Riyadh al-Nadira, a book that he wrote about the beauty of Islam, he has in the beginning of the book 2 chapters where he talks about, or 2 sections where he talks about the beauty of Islamic beliefs. He says, فَهَذِهِ الْعَقَائِدُ الصَّحِيحَةِ النَّافِعَةِ تملأ القلوب أمنا وإيمانا ويقينا ونورا وهدى. That these correct and beneficial beliefs of the Muslim, they fill his heart with amnan, with security, a sense of inner peace. ويقينا, and they fill his heart with faith, and they fill his heart with light and guidance. وتعبدا لله وتألها له, and they cause him and they lead him to the worship and devotion for Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. وإنابة إليه في كل الأحوال, and to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all states, in every circumstance, and in good times, in bad times, and while being tried, while being blessed, and to turn to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala and in worship with gratitude and with patience and with seeking forgiveness and repenting to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala when a person makes an error, and that a person, as a result of their aqidah, that they have inaba to Allah, that they turn to Allah in all conditions. وَلُجُوءًا إِلَيْهِ فِي كُلِّ النَّوَازِلِ وَالْمُحِمَّاتِ, that they seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all crises and in all urgent matters. They turn to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala for guidance and for help. وَتُؤْمَنِينَةً بِمَعْرِفَتِهِ, and they cause a person to find tranquility in knowing Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. وَسُكُونًا إِلَى ذِكْرِهِ وَثَنَاءِ عَلَيْهِ, and to find calmness by remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praising Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. These are the effects of his aqidah upon his heart and upon his character. وَتُوجِبُ لِلْعَبْدِ قُوَّةَ التَّوَكُّلِ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَالْاعْتِمَادَ الْكَامِلِ وَالِاسْتِعَانَةَ بِهِ بِمُزَاوَلَةِ الْأَعْمَالِ الدِّينِيَّةِ وَالدُّنْيَوِيَّةِ. Likewise, his beliefs, they cause him to have strong reliance upon Allah and to have complete dependency upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking his assistance in pursuing both religious and worldly affairs. They put their trust upon Allah tabarak wa ta'ala as a result of their belief, knowing that Allah controls all things. وَكُلَّمَا ضَعُفَتْ إِرَادَةُ الْعَبْدِ وَوَهَتْ قُوَّتُهُ فِي مُحَاوَلَةِ الْمُحِمَّاتِ أمده هذا الإيمان الصادق بقوة قلبية تتبعه الأعمال البدنية. He said that whenever the servant's will and determination is weakened, whenever his strength becomes weak and it wanes, when he is attempting to carry out important tasks, then his sincere, genuine faith provides him with the inner strength that is then reflected in his physical action, that drives him to carry out the deeds that he wants to do. وكلما أحاطت به المخاوف كان هذا الإيمان حصنا حصينا يلجأ إليه المؤمن فيطمئن قلبه وتسكن نفسه. He said, whenever he is surrounded by fearful things, then his faith acts as a strong fortress that he retreats to, and that he finds peace and tranquility for his heart and soul within. And he mentions an example of this from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the lives of the believers and the Sahaba. In Surah Ali Imran verses 173 and 174, the statement of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء واتبعوا رضوان الله والله ذو فضل عظيم. That they are those, the believers are those that when some people said that the people have gathered against you, so fear them. And after being tried on the battlefield, it was said that the disbelievers had regrouped and had regained their strength and had got reinforcements, and they were coming back to finish off the believers. And so when it is said to them that indeed the people have gathered against you, فَخْشَوْهُمْ, so fear them, that increased them in faith. That increased them in faith. And they said, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. That Allah is sufficient for us and most excellent is He as a guardian. فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٌ. And so they incurred upon themselves, they earned for themselves the blessing of Allah and the grace of Allah, and no harm befell them. They had this moment of tawakkul on Allah, trust upon Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, and Allah sufficed them. And there was no more fighting as they expected at that moment. The Sheikh, he says, وَهَذَا الْإِيمَانُ الصَّادِقُ وَالْيَقِينُ الصَّحِيحُ يَحْمِلُ صَاحِبُهُ عَلَى الْعِزَّةِ وَالْقُوَّةِ. That this إيمان الصادق, that this sincere faith and valid certainty and authentic certainty that they had, that it motivated them. يَحْمِلُ صَاحِبَهُ, motivates and empowers the believer to have dignity and strength. وَالشَّجَاعَةِ الْقَوْلِيَّةِ وَالْفِعْلِيَّةِ, to have both verbal and physical courage, to have courage in word and courage in deed. فإنه متى يتيقن العبد أن الله هو نافع الضار المعطي المانع. Because when the believer has certainty and conviction that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He is the causer of benefit and the controller of harm, and that He is the one who gives all that we have and withholds anything that we do not have, has been withheld by Allah. He is the one who gives and the one who withholds. Tabarak wa ta'ala. No one can give what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds, and no one can withhold what Allah gives. And they believe this about Allah, that Allah is the one who controls benefit and harm, and who gives and who withholds. وَأَنَّ مَنْ اعْتَزَّ بِهِ فَهُوَ عَزِيزٌ. And that the person who seeks refuge and protection with Allah, then he will be honored by Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ الْتَجَأَ لِغَيْرِهِ فَهُوَ الضَّلِيلٌ. And the person who seeks refuge in other than Allah is the one who is truly humiliated. وَأَنَ الْخَلْقَ كُلَّهُمْ فُقَرَاءُ إِلَى اللَّهِ لَا يَنْفَعُونَ وَلَا يَضُرُّونَ. When they believe that the entirety of the creation are in dire need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and cannot help themselves or others, or harm themselves or others without the permission of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, أوجب له ذلك القوة بالله والالتجاء إليه. Then this obliges the person to find strength in Allah and to turn to Allah in every situation. وأن لا يخاف ولا يرجو أحدا غير الله ولا يطمع إلا في فضله. And that they do not put their hope or their fear in anyone other than Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, and they don't have any tama', they don't have any desire for anything but the grace and the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبهذا يتم له التحرر من رق المخلوقين. And by a person doing that, then they achieve freedom from being slaves to the creation. They achieve freedom, التحرر من رق المخلوقين. They achieve liberation and freedom from bondage to creation. He says, explaining what he means by that, وَأَنْ لَا يَعْلَقَ قَلْبُهُ بِأَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ فِي نَفْعٍ وَلَا دَفْعِ ضُرٍّ. He says, and when they achieve this, they do not connect their heart. So they do not connect their heart to any of the creation as it relates to expecting benefit from them, or they're protecting them from any type of harm. بَلْ يَكُونُ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ مولاه بل يكون الله وحده مولاه وناصره يتولاه في طلب المنافع ويستنصره في دفع المضار. Or rather, it is Allah alone تبارك وتعالى who is their protector and their helper. He takes care of the believer in achieving and in causing him to achieve that which is beneficial and warding off what is harmful. فيتم له من كفاية المولى وتيسير أموره ما لا يتم لمن لم يكن معه هذا الإيمان. He said, and so by way of believing that Allah is sufficient for him, then his matters are simplified and made easy for him in a way that is not possible for anyone who does not possess this degree of faith. ويحصل له من قوة القلب وشجاعته ما لا يصل إليه من لم يبلغ درجته, and he attains a type of strength and courage in his heart that is unattainable by those who have not reached that same level of faith. وهذا كله من ثمرات الإيمان الصحيح, and all of that is from the fruits of authentic true belief. ومن ثمراته أيضا, likewise from the fruits of faith, أن يصلي العبد عند المصائب. Likewise from the fruits of faith is that it consoles the servant during calamities. And when the believer goes through hardship and calamity, that his faith, that it makes the hardship easier to bear. وَيُهَوِّنُ عَلَيْهِ الشَّدَائِدْ وَالنَّوَائِدْ, and that it lightens his adversities and his hardships and his calamities. وَمَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبِ, as Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He said, and whoever believes in Allah, Allah will guide his heart. وهو العبد الذي تصيبه المصيبة فيعلم أنها من عند الله وأن ما أصابه لم يكن ليخطئه. And that is the servant, when he is struck by a calamity, he knows that it is from Allah, and that what has befallen him can never have missed him. وَمَا أَخْطَأَهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِيُصِيبَهُ, and that what has missed him can never befall him. فَيَرْضَى وَيَسْلَمْ لِأَقْدَارِ الْمُؤْلِمِ. فَيَرْضَى وَيُسْلِمْ لِلْأَقْدَارِ الْمُؤْلِمِ. And so he is pleased and he surrenders to the decree of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, although it is painful. وَتَهُونُ عَلَيْهِ الْمَصَائِبُ الْمُزْعِجَةِ لِصُدُورِهَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ وَإِيصَالِهَا إِلَى ثَوَابِهِ. And this acceptance and submission is made easy for him to bear because he knows that these hardships and what is painful comes from Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, and it will lead him to the reward of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, He said in verse number 104 of Surah An-Nisa, وَلَا تَهِنُوا فِي ابْتِغَاءِ الْقَوْمِ إِن تَكُونُوا تَأْلَمُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ يَأْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَأْلَمُونَ وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ. Allah said, do not be weak in pursuing your enemy. If you are suffering, then they are also suffering as you are suffering. But you expect from Allah what they do not expect. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is Alim and Hakima, and Allah is ever all-knowing and all-wise. وَلِهَذَا يُوجَدُ عند المؤمنين الصادقين حين تصيبهم النوازل والقلاقل والابتلاء من الصبر والثبات والطمأنينة والسكون والقيام بحق الله ما لا يوجد عشر معشاره عندما ليس كذلك وذلك لقوة الإيمان واليقين. He says thus, the sincere, genuine believers, when they are afflicted with hardships and calamities and various types of ordeals and trials, they display patience and steadfastness and tranquility, and they have a peace and a calmness about themselves, and they continue to fulfill the rights of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala in a way that is not found even to a small fraction. And even 1/10 of that is not found with those who are not like that, who do not have that degree of faith. He says, and this is due to what they possess, وَذَلِكَ لِقُوَّةِ الْإِيمَانِ وَالْيَقِينِ, and this is due to the strength of their faith and their certainty. وَمِنْ ثَمَرَاتِ الْإِيمَانِ الصَّادِقِ. Likewise, from the fruits of sincere faith, of genuine, authentic beliefs, أنه يقوي الرغبة في فعل الخيرات, is that it strengthens a person's desire to do good deeds. وتزود من الأعمال الصالحات, and it strengthens their resolve to seek out the provisions for the hereafter of righteous acts, and in preparation for the hereafter. ويدعو إلى رحمة والشفقة على المخلوقات, and it summons them and it calls them and it invites them to be merciful and compassionate for the creation of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. وذلك بسبب داعي الإيمان وبما يحتسبه العبد عند الله من الثواب الجزيل. And this is due to the da'i al-iman, the motivation of faith in his heart, and how the servant seeks the reward of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and for his treatment of other people. ومن ثمراته أيضا, Likewise, amongst its fruits, أنه ينهى عن الشرور والفواحش, is that it prohibits the person from every type of evil and every type of obscenity and disgusting behavior. كلها ما ظهر منها وما بطن, that which is manifest and public and publicized, and that which is hidden and done privately, of obscene behaviors. ويحذر من كل خلق رذيل, and it warns the person against every vile and disgusting type of characteristic. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He said in Surah Al-Anfal, verses number 2 through 4, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. The believers are only those who, when Allah is mentioned, feel a fear in their hearts, that their hearts shake and tremble in fear. وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا, and when His ayat, when His verses are recited to them, they increase them in iman. وعلى ربهم يتوكلون, and they put their trust and dependency upon Allah. الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. They are those who perform and establish the prayer, and they are those who spend from what Allah in His greatness has provided for them. أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا. They are the believers in truth. لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم. They have darajat, they have degrees of high status with Allah and high ranks with Allah, their nurturing Lord, and the forgiveness of their Lord, and they will have rizqun kareem, a noble provision with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. فذكر في هذه الآية أو ذكر الله في هذه الآية ما يثمره الإيمان من أعمال القلوب والجوارح والقيام حق الله تعالى وحق الخلق. In this verse, in these verses, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala mentions what comes as a result of faith, of the fruits of faith, of the actions of the heart and the actions of the limbs, and the fulfillment of the rights of Allah and those of His creation. فهذه الأخلاق الحميدة هل يتوصل إليها بغير الإيمان? He said these noble characteristics and traits that we have mentioned here, he said, how can one attain them without faith? وهل يعصم العبد من انحلال الأخلاق المؤدية إلى الهلاك وهل يعصم العبد من انحلال الخلاق المؤدية إلى الهلاك إلى الإيمان? He says, is there anything other than faith that can safeguard and protect the disintegration of a person's morals and that which leads them to destruction? Is there anything other than faith that can protect them from immorality and that which leads to destruction? وهل أودت بكثير من الخلق الأمور المادية والشهوات البهيمية والأخلاق السبعية وحبتت به من الهلاك إلى حين فقدت روح الإيمان وفقدت روح الإيمان. He says, how many in creation have been led to destruction by materialistic things and animalistic desires and violent traits, and has anything other than the fact that the spirit of faith has been lost by many of the people led them to this condition. وهل تؤدى الأمانات والحقوق الواجبة بغير وازع الإيمان? And is there anything that compels people and encourages people and drives people to fulfill their trust and the obligatory rights other than faith? وهل تثبت القلوب عند المزعجات وتطمئن النفوس عند الكريهات إلا بعدة الإيمان? And is there anything other than the equipment of faith that causes the hearts to remain steady in the face of adversity and the souls to find tranquility when they are experiencing difficult matters? وهل تقنع النفوس برزق الله وتتم لها الراحة والحياة الطيبة في هذه الدار إلا بقوة الإيمان? Is there anything that brings about qana'a, the contentment of the souls with Allah's provisions, and that brings about for the souls الراحة والحياة الطيبة, enjoyment of their life and having a wholesome life and ease and comfort إلا بقوة الإيمان, and they accept the strength of faith. وهل يتحقق العبد بالصدق بأقواله وأفعاله ومعاملته ويكون أمينا شريفا معتبرا عند الله وعند خلقه إلا بالإيمان. Does the servant become truthful in his statements and genuine in his statements and his actions and his dealings? And does he become trustworthy and honorable? And does he become somebody who is of considerable worth in the sight of Allah and in the estimation of the creation, except by way of having faith? فكل أس وأس تنبني عليه هذه الأمور الجليلة سوى الإيمان فهو منهى، وكل رقي مادي لا يصاحبه الإيمان فهو حبوط ودماء. Any foundation that people build themselves upon or build even virtuous character upon that is other than faith will collapse. And any material advancement, any advancement, worldly advancement that is not accompanied by faith will lead people to decline and destruction. ألا وإن الإيمان يحمل العبد على الصبر على قضاء الله والشكر لنعم الله والشفقة على عباد الله وتخلق بكل خلق جميل. Verily, faith encourages a person to be patient with Allah's pre-decree and to be grateful for Allah's blessings and to be compassionate towards Allah's servants and to acquire all good traits and to avoid all evil traits. ومصداق ذلك ما هو موجود في كل متصف بالإيمان ومفقود ممن لم يكن كذلك. He says, and the proof for that is evident in what is seen and witnessed by everybody who has the descriptions of faith and is proved to be missing from those who do not have this iman, do not have this faith. فإن وجدت موصوفا ببعض هذه الصفات وهو غير ملتزم الإسلام فعن الدين الإسلام قد أخذها. He said, if you see somebody who has the characteristics that we mentioned, but who does not profess Islam, who does not say that they are a Muslim, then in fact they have taken these traits from Islamic teachings. They have taken these traits from Islam. We can understand that in two ways. And we'll close on this point. Inshallah ta'ala. And either because it is in the fitrah of people to have all of these traits of goodness, to have all these traits of virtue. And all of these virtues, they are from the fitrah of the human being. As has been highlighted by the ulama, that along with Islam, the correct beliefs and belief in Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, and the perfection and the beauty and the majesty of Allah, being innate in the human being, that upright morality and virtuous traits, that it is from the fitrah of the human being. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala explains in some detail in his book, Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada. And so this is one way that we could look at it, that it is natural for a person, and that these natural things that are from Islam, they are naturally loved by people, of truthfulness and generosity and having high values and high morality and so on and so forth. Another way that we can look at that is that what they are abiding by is from the remnants of the teachings of the prophets and the messengers. People may not believe in Islam, but even the Arab, mathalan, in Jahiliyyah, they were still upon dozens of characteristics and practices that they inherited from the time of Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Jews and the Christians likewise, they inherit from some of the customs and some of the traits and some of the practices that have been passed down throughout the ages, connected to good character and upright morality and so on and so forth, that had their origin in Islam. He said, and so whenever you see a person with these traits who doesn't abide by Islam, then in fact they have taken these traits from Islam, whether they know that or not, or admit it or not. This is the point that we'll close on, inshallah ta'ala. Sa'ilin Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, tawfiq wa sadad wa hidayah wa sabil rashad. We ask Allah tabarak wa ta'ala to beautify our character for us and to protect us from evil, hideous character. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.